Okay, let's get right into it. We're talking about an incredible story of how the entire global economic map was completely redrawn in just a matter of months. What the West thought was a rock-solid, unbreakable alliance with India, a key piece of its whole strategy in Asia, well, it's suddenly shattered, and that sent a massive shockwave across the entire world order.
This quote right here, it just says it all. It perfectly captures the shock that just rippled through the world. For decades, it felt like globalization had this predictable, stable structure. And then, bam, in a flash, one of its most critical pillars started to just fall apart.
So, to really get why this was such a seismic shock, we gotta rewind the clock, but just a little bit. The West, and especially the United States, had placed this enormous geopolitical bet on one single country.
And that country was India. You see, India was positioned as the primary counterweight to China. I mean, think about it. It has a young, democratic population. It was seen as the perfect successor to be the next world's factory. And this wasn't just some economic idea. It was absolutely central to Washington's strategy in the Indo-Pacific, locked in place with huge summits and major tech deals. This partnership, for all intents and purposes, was supposed to define Asia's future.
And then it all just fell apart with breathtaking speed. A change in the White House didn't just tweak a few priorities. No, it completely blew up the very strategy that Washington had spent years and years building. What was once a cornerstone alliance became a major, major point of friction. The first blow was absolutely devastating. Now, the official reason was about protecting domestic industries, a new America First policy. But this wave of American tariffs hit the Indian economy like a sledgehammer. We're talking about the very engines of India's growth. Electronics, pharmaceuticals, textiles, they were basically paralyzed, almost overnight.
And the effect? Whoa, it was instant, and it was absolutely brutal for India's export-heavy economy. The numbers didn't just dip a little, they fell off a cliff. This was not a slow, gradual decline. It was a sudden, violent shock to the entire system.
And what's really staggering here is just the speed of the collapse, a nearly 40% drop. Let that sink in. 40% in just 5 months. This was the biggest and fastest drop in 20 years, wiping out billions of dollars in trade and throwing years of economic progress right into reverse.
And from there, it was like a set of dominoes tipping over, one after another, triggering a full-blown crisis. In August alone, $3 billion in exports just, poof, vanished. Then came the mass layoffs in big industrial cities. Then the financial shock hit. Venture capital giants like Sequoia and Tiger Global just slammed the door shut, leaving startups high and dry. The rupee tanked, inflation shot up, and India's super vibrant tech scene went into a total state of panic.
You could almost feel the panic in the air. Economists started to whisper, then talk openly about a repeat of the 1991 crisis, a moment that really scarred the country's memory. So what do? Where do you go when your economy is in a freefall and your biggest ally has suddenly become your biggest problem? Well, the answer came from a place nobody, and I mean nobody, expected. Just as India was being backed into a corner, its biggest regional rival reached out with a helping hand. Picture this. A closed-door summit for the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. While Washington is turning the screws and applying all this pressure, the Chinese delegation sees this historic, once-in-a-generation opportunity. And they approach India, not with threats, but with a proposal that, honestly, up until that point was completely unthinkable.
Now, for an economy that was suffocating from a lack of US dollars, this wasn't just another trade offer, it was a lifeline. China proposed this radical plan to massively expand trade within the BRICS group, but here's the kicker. It would all be done using their own national currencies. They were essentially creating a parallel financial system that completely bypassed the US dollar.
And that offer, it changed everything. It set the stage for one of the most significant economic realignments of this century. India, with its back against the wall and very few options left, took the deal. And in just a matter of weeks, a new pact was forged. For an Indian economy that was just bleeding cash, this was an absolute game changer. The two countries announced over $30 billion in joint projects. We're talking about huge new industrial zones, expanding the port in Mumbai, and new lines of credit for Indian companies. All of it backed by Chinese state banks. Okay, this slide right here is so important because it really shows you the core of this pivot. See, India isn't just swapping one trading partner for another. No. It's changing the entire financial system it lives in. It's moving away from a world based on the dollar, SWIFT, and Western money over to a new system built on the yuan and the rupee, potentially using China's own payment network and funded by state-backed credit.
And this happened fast, I mean really fast. In just 2 months, you had over 70 major Indian companies starting to trade in yuan. Then, China began sending huge manufacturing orders to India. And, this is the big one, negotiations started to connect India's banks to SIPs, China's alternative to SWIFT. This was a move toward deep, foundational economic integration.
All right, so let's zoom out. What does all of this mean for the rest of the world, for the rest of us? Because this wasn't just a regional story about India and China. We are talking about the creation of a whole new economic map. Meanwhile, back in Washington, total panic mode. The alarm bells were screaming. As one U.S. official put it, if India enters China's orbit, the entire regional balance collapses. I mean, imagine spending years building this perfect strategy only to watch it just crumble before your eyes. And this is the craziest part, the ultimate irony of this whole situation. The very policy that was designed to contain China and reassert American power may have done the exact opposite. By targeting India, the U.S. accidentally pushed its main regional competitor right into Beijing's arms, making China stronger in Asia in a way it probably never could have on its own. So, what's the big takeaway here? This whole pivot forces us to ask a really fundamental question about the future. China is building this new economic network, offering an alternative to countries that feel squeezed by sanctions and tariffs. This is way more than just a trade dispute. It's a complete rewiring of the global order. So the question we're left with is this. Are we watching the birth of a truly multipolar world where the US dollar is no longer the only game in town? And if we are, what happens when a